Okay, hello again. So just making this quick video of my network setup here with Verizon Fios. I loved it since the installation. Obviously a little unorganized the way everything is, but let's start from up here. You'll see where the fiber optic came in. Like this is the cable here. You could even see it says optical fiber cable right there. Right, comes in, terminates right there into this box. And if you have one of these boxes at home, right, for your Fios, and I'm sorry I didn't say this, I have the optimum 1 gig plan. If you watch my previous video, you'll see where I talked about the 1 gig plan that I have and the speed test and everything that I did. So typically when they're setting this up, you have the option of using getting it over Ethernet or coaxial. And you can see here I'm doing it over Ethernet. That cable comes down there and it comes into this Fios modem slash router, but it's just strictly a router right now. That G3100, I believe it is, right? Am I correct? Yes, G3100. That is, again, this guy right here. And you can see it comes in. I have a bunch of stuff. Right, it has 5 ports in the back for your Ethernet. So the main one is where your internet goes out, and you have 4 LAN ports. So you can see the 4 plugged in there. Then I have it go into my 8-port switch, because obviously I needed. You can see I have a bunch of cables. I needed additional cables. So I'll, a little later in this video, you'll see where I actually logged into my GS3100, and you'll see how it's being used. I'm actually not using the wireless feature of my modem slash router or router. And again, because I'm getting it over Ethernet as opposed to coaxial, right? I'm getting it over Ethernet as opposed to coaxial. I could technically use any router that I want. I don't know if you guys know about that. You do not have to have the Verizon router, especially if you have the 1 gig internet only plan. Even though it's included in the monthly fee, as I've also stated in my previous video, you do not need the router. So if you have a router that's more powerful that you'd like to use, with all means, that's the Ethernet cable. It's standard. All you'll have to do, from what I read, is to just release the IP from this router and then plug in the new one. I think it was release the IP and unplug it and wait a while or something like that. Probably 24 hours. I don't know if it's going to take that long. Plug in the new router and power it up, and it should get an IP address, a WAN IP, and it should be fine. I've never had to do it because you can see I'm using the Verizon provided G31 router. And again, this router, because my network is a little complex in the setup, you know, you can see I have a server down there. I have some NIC teaming going. I have different Hyper-V clients. If you watch, again, my previous videos, you'll see those. So this router is really, this device is playing the job of being a router and a firewall, right? It's doing the routing and pretty much the firewall. Meaning if someone was supposed to try to access a computer within my network, it would not be possible. unless that computer is open on the router side, so meaning port forwarding or something along that line. Otherwise, that's the part of the firewall within that router, is that it blocks everything within your network off from the internet. Alright, so if this is not providing my wireless, you're probably asking, if this is not providing the wireless, what is providing the wireless? So let me show you. Okay, so here I am on the first floor of my home, showing you how we connect wirelessly. So this is one of the devices I use strictly for Wi-Fi. You can see in the back of it, all it has is the power cable plugged in and Ethernet cable plugged in. Right? No other cable is plugged in. It's strictly for Wi-Fi. This device is the Linksys WRT1900ACS V2. Right, I can show you that here at the bottom, so you can see it there. Linksys WRT1900ACS V2. This device is also using the DDWRT firmware. So not sure if you guys are familiar with that firmware, but within this video I'll log into that and I'll let you see the features of it. So this Wi-Fi router or wireless access point is predominantly for my cameras and if there are domain laptops within my home, and I don't want to get too technical, but if there are domain laptops with radius authentication, they'll log into the 5 gigahertz frequency. So this Wi-Fi has two bands. It has the 5 gigahertz frequency and the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. So the 5 gigahertz frequency and the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. The 5 gigahertz frequency is where we use radius authentication. The 2.4 gigahertz frequency is for everything else on regular WPA2 encryption. Not radius, but the standard. So that's for the Wi-Fi downstairs. The other AP that I'm going to show you here in a moment is where the kids would connect to, and there's I'll show you that here. Okay, so this is the next device that I have in my home for wireless access point. So this is the Netgear, what is it again? X6 R7900. So again, this device, try to turn off the light here. It might be, nope, not a good idea. Turn that back on, back up a little. So this device is the Netgear Nighthawk X6. You can see the model there, AC3000, model R7900. Oops, guys, you're gonna lose internet. I just disconnected the wireless access point here. So you're gonna lose internet. Just wait for a moment. Okay. Alright, it's all back on the wall. You guys probably saw that I accidentally disconnected. So everything stopped working, at least for the kids. So this is the second wireless access point in the home. It has 3 bands. It has 2 5 gigahertz frequency and 1 2.4. The 2.4 we're not using. Actually the 2.4 signal is pretty bad up here. So we don't use the 2.4. Only the 2 5 gigahertz band are being used. The There's two rooms up here. One room uses one of the 5 gigahertz frequency, and that's for the domain computers. And the other room uses the other 5 gigahertz frequency, and that's for everything, including guests that uses that other frequency. So here you can see, I don't know if you could tell, so I don't know if you could tell, you can see there's no power source available anywhere here. So the way that I was able to get around that is, you can see there are 2 Cat5e cables here, right? 2 Cat5e cables here. However, you see some black tape here. So what I had to do, I mean, you guys could watch other videos on this. I had to cut the AC adapter cable for this wireless access point, you know, this Netgear device. Use a Cat5e cable. You could use a Cat6 cable as well. You probably don't want to use a Cat5 because it limits your speed. Is just going to give you a 100, right? You have to know your cables. So the Cat5, well, you know, that actually doesn't matter here. It did not matter here if you use a Cat5 or a Cat5e, because as you can see here, I use 2 cables. In the videos that you're probably going to watch, they're going to probably use a single cable for the data and the power. The problem with that option is that it limits this to 100 megabits per second, right? You're not going to get more than 100 megabits per second, even though these ports at the bottom are 1 gig ports. So in order for you to have that 1 gig speed, you really need this to be, you have to use all 8 pairs, right? If you're using the Ethernet cable, you have to use all 8 pairs within the Cat5 cable, which is the reason why I have 2 Cat5e cables here, one for the data and the next for the power, right? I know that was a long explanation. Probably don't matter in your environment if you're not going to move the router where it doesn't need to be, but that's what I did here, because otherwise I would have to run a power onto this wall somewhere to plug it in. So I was able to cheat that by splicing my AC adapter, and you can see I splice pretty close to the end, right? You don't want to go too close to the end, right? Give yourself some room. So splice pretty close to the tip, use a Cat5e cable, cut it to the length that I want. You know, from what I read, you want to stay within a certain distance from where the AC adapter is down there. I think this is probably like a 25 to 28 foot data cable, but I believe you could go up to 100 without it affecting your device. Like, I think if you make it too long, it's not going to have enough power. You're going to have too much loss within that length. You know, that's not my specialty. I'm just glad that when I watched the YouTube video on how to do this, it was able to power the router. I mean, my wireless access point here. So that worked for me, and yeah, that's that. Okay, so I'm back again at that Linksys WRT1900ACS V2 router, you know, wireless router. I'm just using it as a wireless access point. So that's what this is. It's really just an AP for me. And again, no other network devices are connected. Just those 2 cords are connected. And I just want to show you something here, because you notice the internet port is, there's nothing plugged into it, right? Typically that's your main port when you're plugging in a router or a wireless device. You know, that's where the internet comes in, and then, you know, those other 4 ports, your LAN ports, is where everything internally connects to. So I just want to show you how it is on my network, and I'll log in on my computer here and show you why that is, so you're not confused. And my Netgear is the same way. It has the power, and it also is plugged into one of the LAN ports. And I believe I'm just using one. Is that, let's see, I'm actually using 4, but it doesn't matter. You can see down there it's plugged into 4 right now, but it doesn't matter. It could have been plugged into 3, could be plugged into 2, could be plugged into 1, as long as I'm using any of those 4 ports. And it's a reason behind it, and I'll explain that here shortly.
Alright, so here I am logged into my Verizon Fios router. If you recall, early in the video I said that the router is really just a router, right? It's being a router, which is a layer 3 devices. It routes IP addresses, and it's also a firewall. Those are the 2 main function that I'm using, the primary function I'm using the router for. And again, the way that it was connected, I was using the Ethernet cable instead of the coaxial, because I had that option, and that allowed me to use any router that I wanted. But I decided to just stay with the Verizon Fios router. It's included, no big deal. You know, why not? And it's free, no extra cost, right? So here you can see my WAN status is connected. You can see I'm getting the IP address from DHCP, and my firewall is at a medium level. By default, that's at a low level, right? But I changed it to medium level. There's a higher level, and I believe there's a very high level. And I didn't want to go crazy and start blocking everything now. So I left it at the medium level. That's good enough for my needs. And you can see so far it's only about 24 devices that are connected. It's not showing all of them right now, simply because this is the weekend, right? Like in my previous videos, I said there are 4 kids in school, so they're in regular school week, school day. We have some Chromebooks also on at the time, possibly other devices as well. But here you could see what is currently on the network right now. It's probably not that much, right? Not that many. And big highlight, you can see my Wi-Fi is off. Again, primarily what I use the Fios router for is to route, right? That routing functionality. You know, if I want to reach out to the internet, as well as to route packets, it's a layer 3 device. And the firewall, meaning, you know, someone from the outside can't just scan all the computers within my network. It first needs to get through my router slash firewall, right? And there's ways to get past that. I'm just showing it's not going to be easy for anyone to just scan any of the computers within my network without first bypassing that. So there are a few things that I did here within the network. So because I use my own DHCP server, right? I don't want to get too complicated with the explanation, but because I use my own DHCP server, and what that means is when you plug in your computer, it gets an IP address to be able to communicate on the network, right? Typically, the home environment is the range of 192.168.something something something, or 10.something something something, or 172.16 through 32.something something something. Typically, those are the rates for internal network. So you can see I'm within that range. I'm in the 10 dot range. for my network, and I have a DHCP server that's issuing out that IP address range. You remember when I showed you the video of the router where I plugged in the cable, I'm sorry, the wireless access point, both wireless access point, the Linksys and the Netgear wireless access point, where I plugged in the Ethernet cable in the LAN in one of the LAN ports instead of the WAN port, right? And I did that because I was using my own DHCP server. In addition to, I want the DHCP server to be able to give out an IP address. I could have, obviously used the WAN port on that AP and give it a different IP address range, but then I would not be able to monitor the network the way that I want it to do. So that's why, it is a lot more complex explanation behind it, but I'm just going to keep it simple here. So if you had a router, I think, if you just have one router within your environment, that device should be giving out the IP address. So let's say you have a big home or you have multiple levels, and you need a better signal in a different area of your home, and you purchase this wireless access point, and you have a long cable, right? Obviously, you have to get there. You could wirelessly bridge it, which means you could just plug that wireless device in the area where you want it and wireless connect the two if the software supports it. But I don't recommend that, especially if you want the best possible signal. Plug them in physically with the cable, the Ethernet cable. That's going to give you a dedicated bandwidth, versus when you do wirelessly, I mean, any interference is just going to mess up your signal, which means you're going to have a low quality. So you can see in my home, I had one on the lower level on the first floor. The Linksys was on the first floor and the Netgear was on the second floor. And it was also good because now we separate who gets on with what band. Because sometimes the kids might be doing gaming, right? And you don't want that to affect your cameras, or you don't want it to affect your work computer, your work stuff. So it's good to have that separation, right? Have them play on one band while you're on the other band. Now they're both sharing, possibly going to share the same AP, and that's okay. But if you have different wireless access point like I do, that's a plus, right? Because then it separates everything. Your router is not doing so many things, because I've seen in some homes they only have one modem slash router slash wireless access point slash firewall. So that one device, though it's powerful and you probably paid a lot of money for it, that's doing everything, right? Just think about it. Do you like to have an all-in-one device, right? Because that's what this is. Do you rather have an all-in-one device, or you want to just have that separation, right? So if something breaks or if you need to change it, you could easily do that because you have these modules or these components or, these different devices that you could change, versus an all-in-one, something breaks, you don't know where. You're going to have to troubleshoot longer. Is it the Wi-Fi that's the problem? Is it the firewall that's the problem? Is it the modem that's the problem? Is it the cable that's the problem? Is it the routing that's the problem, right? So many things could go wrong when you're using that all-in-one device. So that's why I'm not a big fan of that. I'll rather have that separation. So that's what I have within my network. So again, I have my own server doing the DHCP. I actually went in and did a few things. So I went into the IP distribution, You can see I had to edit it, but this is actually disabled. So if I click on this, you can see IP distribution is disabled because I set it that way. I'm not using this to disable it to give IP address, but um, you might be using it to give IP address. See what it's showing here. So if we go to network and we go to network connections, I'm not going to touch the broadband, the Ethernet/coax, right? Because that's the WAN side. I want to click on the network/home office. Okay, so once I click on that network connections page, the first thing I did was to double check that the IPv4 address distribution was disabled, as I've shown you previously. And then I went down to settings, and in settings you could see you have this option to basically go in and configure the IP address and the subnet mask that you'd like for your environment. So when you're setting up your network, obviously you need an IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, DNS servers, right? Those are typically what you're needing to set up your IP address. So this device, again, going back to what I said, this only function as a router and a firewall. So in a sense, this would be the default gateway. If anything on my network needs to go outside the internet, it goes out through my router, which is essentially the default gateway. So that IP address that you see right here, that's my default gateway IP address. That 10.18.20.1, you can see the subnet mask is a class C, 255.255.255.0. So that's where I went and manually configured this. But again, this is my environment. Obviously, in your environment, you are not going to probably have this problem, this issue. But I'm just showing you how it's configured in my environment because that's how I needed it to set up within my domain, within my network, excuse me, there. So, okay. So that is my Fios router. I'm going to go back to the home page here. The next part of this, the next device that we talked about was my Netgear. Remember, the Netgear was on the second floor. So you can see it's running DDWRT, as I've stated before. You can see the firmware version that it's running, DDWRT V3.0 R4500. You can see the date. This was recent, December 14, 2020. So that's the firmware version that it's running. And here the model is saying R8000. So if you go on the DDWRT website, it will show you firmware for the R8000, different models. It will not have a firmware for the R7900. If you remember, I showed you the video of my router or my wireless access point. Netgear router is really a router, but I use it as a wireless access point. I showed you the model where it stated it was a R7900, right? Not a R8000. So I had to follow an article, and I created a video on this, right? I had to follow an article, convert it, flash it to OpenWRT, which is another open source firmware, and then flash it to DDWRT, right? So it's a process to get it to the R8000 and to be able to use DDWRT. You can't just download it and install it like probably other supported routers for DDWRT. So just wanted to show that. Again, this router, this is the Netgear Nighthawk X6 R7900, right? So I'm just going to go through a few of the pages so you see what is set up here. So you can see my WAN type. This is the WAN port. You can see it's set to disable, right? It's set to disable there because I'm not using the WAN port, correct, right? Not using the WAN port. You can see I gave myself an IP address for the router itself. Again, this is just my network. You're not going to do this on yours unless you understand what you're doing. You can see I checked the box here to assign my WAN port to the switch. That way, if I needed a fifth port on the switch, right, I could now use my WAN port as part of that groups of LAN 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 ports, right? It will all be on the same network. But as I've showed you, I am not using, you know, the cable was probably plugged into port 1 or port 4. That's typically the ones I'll use. I'll use the first or the last one. I typically don't use the two in the middle, right? So the first or the last. So here you can see DHCP type, and it's disabled, right? Because I'm using something else. I have in my NTP client a time zone set. That way, the time up here is correct, right? Also, because this is just a wireless access point, I had to change the routing. So I had to go to advanced routing, and typically operating mode is going to be on gateway by default. So I changed that to router, and it tells you over here, right? Operating mode. It says if the router is hosting your internet connection, select gateway mode, right? I know this is not hosting my internet connection, right? I have the Verizon device, G3100, that's hosting my my internet connection. So that is the router. So I changed this to router mode instead of gateway mode, right? I did not change anything else. And then I go into my wireless, and this is pretty common, you know, if you have this model. I'm just showing you my example here. So I went into my wireless network. I set it up the way I want. And this is based on some of DDWRT best practices, or, you know, what they'll recommend. So you can see my regulatory domain, United States, right? Wireless mode, AP, access point. Wireless network mode, you can see AC/N, and you can see my choices here. I stay with AC/N because, you know, that's best for me. I gave it a name. Here, I've played around with different channels in this group, and really the one that works for me is 161. Right? So you can see here I'm on I'm on channel width, because when you change the width, it changes this lower extension, this value down here, and also the channel list. So really you need to change the channel width first. So I select 40 again. If I go with 80, even though I have the option of using 80, it doesn't work quite well, right? I'll get sometimes extremely low speeds, very, you know, very slow, like 4 megabits per second, for some reason. Versus when I do 40, I'll get the max I ever get on this router is about 50 megabits per second. You know, actually, I'm lying. On the computer, I get about 50 megabits per second, but on my cell phone, I get about 107 megabits per second. So pretty high on my phone, but on the computers, for some reason, you know, I get that 50 is the highest it tends to go. So again, when you're doing this, you want to change the width first. Again, I go with 40 megahertz, and then change this to lower. That's what I do for the the zero, interface 0, right? WL0, and then use 161 as your channel. Here, some of these are going to be enabled by default, but implicit beaming is going to be disabled, so you can see I enable that. Explicit beaming is really if your device supports it, and you'll know if your device supports it. If you don't, I'll probably just leave it disabled and enable implicit beaming, and go from there. I'm just telling you what's working for me on this device. You may have a different experience. It's just what's working for me, and trust me, I've done a lot of testing. So here you can see I'm not using the 2.4 gigahertz frequency because I have very bad experience with the 2.4 on this device. I mean, it's really bad. So I disable it. I do not use it. I come down to the second 5 gigahertz frequency, and essentially did the same thing that I did for the first 5 gigahertz frequency. So here, again, give it a network name. Select the channel width first, because the channel width changes this value, and when you change this value, it changes your channel selection that you could have. So channel width first, which changes this value, and then you could select your wireless channel. So what works for me on WL2, right, your interface 2, is 40 megahertz upper, right, extension channel upper, and then I'll go with 36 for that. And again, implicit beaming is enable. I'm not going to go to wireless security because you know what, let's go to it, because it's not going to show my password or anything. So you could see when you do that, obviously when you work with DDWRT, you need to go in and set up your what is that? Set up your security, your wireless security. So you can see here, my wireless security is set up. You know, for my WL0, interface 0, as I've stated before, it's using radius authentication because I have a domain environment here. So the wireless domain device, domain clients, they're connected with radius authentication using their AD account or the computer PC name, right? That automatically connected to the radius. That's the point of the radius, right? It auto connects if it's a trusted device. Again, the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, which is interface 1, that's disabled, but it does have security because I used to use it, right? But that is disabled. Interface 2, you can see it's using just the regular WPA2 encryption there for that. Services, right? I'll just go through the standard. I think for the most part everything is disabled except for SSH, right? My SSH is enable. Security, I disable security because I have a router, right? This is just a wireless access point. I do not need security on this. It's just a WAP. So you can see I disable security on this. I check this box to filter multicast, which I don't believe it do anything. Simply, this is saying black WAN request, and then, you know, the security is disabled. So I don't believe checking this box does anything here because the security is disabled anyway. But I just wanted to show you that. Access restriction, I have nothing there. NAT/QoS, I have nothing there. Those are all standard, all default. What else? Administration. I think I'm missing something here. Let's just double check. No. All right, so in administration, it's pretty standard. What I love about the DDWRT is the amount of customization that you have. So here you can see I have a cron job, and what this does, you can see it says WL space -I space ETH0 radio off. So you can see it's actually turning off the Wi-Fi. So if you have kids at home, and they stay up till all hours of night, right? And you'd like to put an end to that, you could use this to disable the Wi-Fi. So this actually turns off the Wi-Fi around 9:30. It's like clockwork, and it turns it on at 6 a.m. So it's good enough for them to do school, right? It starts at 6 a.m. and it turns off at 9:30, and you can see the time there. It goes all the way. You know, I could have put one, but there's a catch. So let's say it turns off at 9:30, but the power went out at 9:36 and it came back on at 9:40. Well, if the router comes up, right, it's actually going to enable the Wi-Fi again. So that's why you have to continuously put these in it up until the point that you want it to come back on. So here you can see I do it every 15-minute intervals. So if the kids, you know, were smart and they want to get around this, they could really do. But it would only work for 15 minutes. It will only work for 15 minutes. So I think in that case, it would be very annoying. Okay, so yeah, just wanted to show that part using cron job to basically disable Wi-Fi if you have kids in the house, or even for security, you know, for different times of the night, just disable this. You know, I could get granular and do it every 5 minutes, but that means I would have to come in here and do all those entries, and I don't want to. So far, this is working for me. And if I do see a problem where you know, it's not working, then and you know they're able to circumvent this, then I'll have to do something else drastically to cut that off. But that is the measure that I use right now to disable Wi-Fi at night, um, and go from there. What else do I do? I recently enabled this. This is the Keeper Live function, and this is just on this router, not on my Linksys, because my Linksys don't need either one of them. My Linksys don't have a need for the cron job, and it doesn't have a need for what is that? It doesn't have a need for the reboot. So looks like I'm having problems with my website here. I'm just going to try it again, press enter. All right, so let's go back here, keep alive. Okay, so yeah, you can see this restarts. So according to the cron job, let's go back here, right? It shuts down every night starting at 9:30, right? If you, that's the 2100, that's right, 24-hour time frame there. So at 2100, 2130, it shuts down, right? So 9:30 military time, and it comes on at 0600, so 6 a.m. in the morning. It comes on, and you can see what it's shutting down is interface 3. So if we go over here to sysinfo, we scroll down. Did I say interface? You can see it's showing interface 0, interface 2. However, in the back end, like if you're supposed to SSH in, it is actually ET up. Sorry, that's the Linksys. It is actually let's go back. It's ETH. I don't remember where I got the command, but again, if you SSH in to actually look at the interface, it's actually ETH. So that's why I have ETH3 and not WL2, which is what it's really disabling. So ETH3 is the WL2. So that is my Netgear. My Linksys, again, which is on the first floor. This video is longer than I expected, but hopefully it's helpful for you. My Linksys, which is on the first floor, right, that WRT1900, ACS V2 model. This has much better speed and performance than my Netgear, believe it or not. And both of these devices I have actually found on Craigslist. I believe I made that, I said that in previous video. This one I purchased for 40 bucks, right? Even made a video on it and purchased the AC adapter separately. And then this one I purchased for 35 bucks. However, the AC adapter was wrong, and I had to purchase an AC adapter as well, and that was about $19 with taxes and shipping off eBay. Considered a good deal. I'm not going to go through all the settings I just did because for the most part they're the same, right? There's like tick for tack except for the Wi-Fi. I use a different channel, obviously, right? I use a different channel. I'm using the 2.4 gigahertz frequency on this one, right? Pretty standard. When you're using the 2.4 frequency, you know, you either use auto or use channel 1, 6, or 11, right? Those are the non-overlapping channel on that in that frequency range. Or you go with the 5 gigahertz frequency where you have a little more channel option. I'm not sure if all of these are valid, but you can see I have quite a few here that I could choose from. And you can see I choose 149 here in the upper level. The wireless security, I showed you that. That's pretty much the same for everything there, so I won't go into that. And I believe that's about it for this. Again, everything is the same. Administration, I did not have to do any cron because I actually want all the kids do not connect to this one. They don't have the password for this AP, any of the radio, any of the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz frequency, so they're not able to connect to this at all. So I do not need to shut it down, and it does better than the Netgear, so I don't need a reboot. But if I did, it would be the same configuration. Here you could see it's running the same firmware version. R4500 that was released December 14, 2020, the same as the Netgear, right? If you recall, here it is. They're the same release. And so far they've been working for me. So, and again, this is the Linksys WRT1900 ACS. Even though it's showing ACS here, it's really the V2 model. If it's, you know, if maybe it's just a bad label on the bottom or something, but I use the V2 firmware on this. So just be careful. You know, just look on the bottom for the model. If it matches up what I have, then you have the V2. Just use the V2 on your device to be able to set it up and not use the wrong firmware because, as you know, that will brick it, right? So yeah, that is it. Just want to show off my network there from my Verizon router. That's again just being the router slash firewall to my 2 wireless access point, my Netgear R7900. But you can see I converted it to be R8000 to be able to get the DDWRT on it. And then my Linksys WRT1900ACS V2, and they're running this particular version, and I showed you the settings that I have. So far so good. You know, can't complain. You know, so it's, again, just wanted to show you this. Hope you like it. Continue to watch the videos that I post. Thank you.